Good evening. Tonight we leave behind the dusty timelines and battle epics to ascend somewhere much higher, not to the realm of mortals, but to Mount Olympus itself. Here, the air is rich with ambrosia, the clouds carry gossip, and the gods, well, let's just say they were far messier than their statues suggest. If this kind of storytelling helps you unwind, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. There's always something comforting about seeing others drift off to the same quiet mythology. So get comfortable, let the world settle around you, and let's begin with what the Olympian gods were really like. Mount Olympus and the Olympians let us begin as all good stories ought to, with a mountain at dusk. Not just any mountain, mind you, but Mount Olympus, the divine residence of the gods. Here the clouds gather like courtly drapery, and the air smells faintly of ambrosia and perhaps on occasion burnt offerings wafting up from the mortal world far below. It stands tall and regal on the northern frontier of ancient Greece, its summit so often hidden by mist that it seemed only natural to assume someone or something must be living up there. In truth, Olympus is a very real mountain, the highest in Greece, rising to just under 10,000 feet, but to the ancient Greeks it wasn't merely a collection of rocks and ridges. No, it was sacred geography, the celestial seat of power draped in ever-changing light and ever-watchful silence. They saw it not as something to be climbed but to be revered, a divine penthouse with rather exclusive tenants. Those tenants are, yes, the Olympians, 12 gods and goddesses, give or take a few, depending on which myth you believe and how generous you're feeling with seating arrangements. Together, they form the core of the ancient Greek pantheon, capricious, passionate, thunderous, petty, brilliant, and worshipped, feared, and occasionally gossiped about for centuries, quite like celebrities really, if celebrities could hurl lightning and turn people into olive trees. Zeus, king of the gods. Before we meet them individually, let's linger a little on the setting. It's twilight on Olympus, the hour when the golden light fades gently behind marble colonnades and divine banquets are just beginning. Imagine wide halls gleaming with polished stone, lyres playing softly in the background, and long tables groaning with impossible fruits, cheeses aged by the winds of prophecy, and wine so potent they'd make a satyr weep with joy. This is no place of solemnity. Olympus, in myth, was vibrant, divine, occasionally chaotic, like a very large dysfunctional family gathering with a healthy sprinkling of immortality and magical livestock. The kind of place where someone is always playing a harp and someone else is always dramatically storming out. If you're imagining marble floors and ionic columns, you're not entirely off base, but don't expect a neatly catalogued palace blueprint. The earliest Greek poets, Homer and Hesiod, speak of radiant halls and cloud gates, but they weren't exactly architectural draftsmen. What we're given is a suggestion of immense beauty, shimmering materials, and eternal comfort. Halls of bronze and gold, courtyards paved with sunlight, feasts that never end, and fountains that sing. It's less of a building and more of a heavenly ambiance. The divine lifestyle, and what's a good ambiance without a menu? You'll be pleased to know the gods dined rather well. Their diet consisted primarily of two things: ambrosia and nectar. Not to be confused with a posh London cafe, ambrosia was said to be the food of immortality. What it actually tasted like depends on the source. Some say honeyed bread, others a kind of fragrant perfume you absorbed through your very essence, which, frankly, sounds more like skincare than a starter. Nectar, its liquid companion, flowed like sunlight in a chalice, served in cups of gold, and kept everyone in a perpetually divine state of health, youth, and likely a mild buzz. The gods didn't age. They didn't get ill. They didn't suffer the usual indignities of mortal life, apart from emotional outbursts, which, if anything, they had in abundance. The divine lifestyle was not without its duties, however. Each god had a portfolio, so to speak. Zeus, for example, handled thunderstorms, law, and infidelity. Poseidon had dominion over the sea, earthquakes, and moody tridents. Athena took care of wisdom, war strategy, and glowering from behind shields. Each Olympian had their domain, and while some took their roles seriously, others used them as an excuse to meddle in mortal affairs or skip staff meetings altogether. Hera, queen of the gods, one might imagine that a day on Olympus involved quite a lot of sitting around looking powerful, which, to be fair, it probably did. But it also meant making decisions. Would a hero succeed in his quest? Would a city be blessed with rain or buried under ash? Would a mortal's prayer be answered or ignored? The gods were not bound by logic, they were divine after all. And if they seemed inconsistent, well, that was rather the point. The world was unpredictable, and so were its rulers. From their cloud-wrapped thrones the gods watched mortals go about their business with varying degrees of interest. They observed, they judged, they laughed, they wept occasionally, and sometimes they interfered, often dramatically. The line between gods and mortals, you see, was not quite so firm in ancient Greek thought. The gods were not distant deities, unreachable and abstract. They were near, familiar, emotionally turbulent. They could take human form, walk among us, fall in love, or lust more often, and produce heroes with a knack for slaying monsters and starting wars. Their children became demigods, whose lives were extraordinary but seldom long. But Olympus itself was different. It was the place the gods returned to, a safe haven above the chaos of the world. Imagine, if you will, the moment after a storm. The clouds parting, a golden glow returning, and silence falling over the peaks. That was Olympus, not a realm of perfection but of divine pause, the only real constant in a world where nothing else lasted. Poseidon, god of the sea now, about the company kept on this mountaintop. We often refer to the 12 Olympians, but the list wasn't entirely fixed. It usually included Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Hephaestus, Aphrodite, Hermes, and either Dionysus or Hestia. Poor Hestia was occasionally bumped from the guest list despite being the goddess of the hearth. One assumes she didn't mind. She always struck me as someone who preferred a quiet evening by the fire to a thunderbolt measuring contest between brothers. Each god brought something unique to the table. Apollo, radiant and polished, never without his lyre or a cryptic prophecy. Artemis, watchful and swift, ever elusive beneath the trees. Ares, brawny and brash, the kind of guest who eats all the olives and breaks the furniture. Aphrodite, all soft glances and dangerously persuasive silences. And Hermes, that wily trickster with a grin that said he'd already stolen your sandals. They were gods, yes, but unmistakably human in spirit. That was the genius of Greek mythology. Its divinities reflected us in all our glittering flaws. Athena, goddess of wisdom, the Greeks built temples to honor them. Yes, magnificent columns rising toward the sky, sanctuaries thick with incense and prayer. But they also told stories. Myths passed from lips to ears, campfires to amphitheaters. Stories of love, betrayal, pride, revenge. Stories that taught, warned, entertained. Olympus was not just a place above the clouds. It was a theater stage, a family drama, a mirror of the human soul raised to cosmic scale. And what of the mortals who gazed up toward the summit? They knew they would never see its peak. Olympus was shrouded not just in clouds but in mystery. No human was meant to reach it, not really. Those who tried, like the Titan Atlas who bore the sky on his back, often paid dearly for their ambition. Olympus was a place of dreams. It was not for climbing, it was for imagining. And imagine it they did. The poets, especially Homer in his Iliad and Odyssey, filled Olympus with radiant halls and divine disputes. Hesiod gave it grandeur, genealogy, structure. Later playwrights gave it irony, philosophers gave it doubt. But always, Olympus remained serene, glowing gently, aloof. Artemis and Apollo, twin gods today. The mountain still stands. People hike it now, of course, in sturdy boots with trail mix and GPS. They reach the summit and see the land stretch far in all directions, the Aegean in the distance, fields below like faded mosaics. But they do not find temples, only wind and sky and the sense of something ancient watching quietly. The gods may not live there anymore, but their stories linger in the air. And perhaps, as the sun sets over the crags and shadows pool like old wine, one might close their eyes and hear faintly the sound of laughter carried on the breeze. A harp, a voice, a divine footstep. Something not entirely gone. Ares and Hephaestus, gods of war and forge, so. Let us leave Olympus now with a gentle step and a quiet heart. The gods are at their table, the torches are lit, and the stars have begun to shimmer above their golden halls. Sleep well, traveler. You're in good company. Dionysus and Hermes, gods of transition tonight. We begin with the sound of distant thunder, not the kind that announces a storm, mind you. No, this one rolls in slow and steady, like a drumbeat from the heavens, accompanied by a flicker of lightning that's more theatrical than threatening. You see, when Zeus makes an entrance, he does enjoy a bit of atmosphere. Hestia and Hades, gods of hearth and underworld. Zeus, king of the gods, ruler of Olympus, lord of thunder, rain, and the celestial order. and incidentally, one of the most complicated family men in all of mythology, which, considering his company, is really saying something. But let's not start with his scandals just yet. First, let us imagine him as the Greeks once did, seated high on his throne atop Olympus, robed in flowing white and gold, a scepter in one hand, a thunderbolt in the other, and an expression that oscillates somewhere between stern authority and amused distraction. Around him, the air hums with power. He is not just a king. He is the very embodiment of law, order, and cosmic balance. Most of the time. Conclusion: Zeus did not inherit Olympus by luck. His story begins in the deep past, long before there were temples, poets, or polite prayer. Born to the Titans Cronus and Rhea, Zeus was the youngest of 6 children and the only one not immediately swallowed at birth. Yes, swallowed. Cronus, their father, had a nasty habit of eating his offspring to avoid being overthrown. It's the sort of parenting style that usually lands one on a watch list. But Rhea, the clever mother that she was, spirited baby Zeus away and tricked Cronus with a swaddled rock, which he rather embarrassingly swallowed whole. Meanwhile, Zeus grew up hidden in a cave on the island of Crete, raised by nymphs, suckled by a magical goat, and protected by divine warriors who clashed their spears to muffle his cries. A rather noisy nursery, but effective nonetheless. When Zeus came of age, he did what any ambitious son of prophecy might do. He returned, tricked Cronus into disgorging his siblings, and led a divine rebellion known as the Titanomachy. For 10 years, the younger gods, the Olympians, battled the old order until Zeus hurled the final thunderbolt and sealed their victory. The Titans were cast into Tartarus, a sort of godly oubliette, and Olympus was claimed. This then was how Zeus became king, not by birthright, but by cleverness, courage, and it must be said, a knack for dramatic timing. As king, Zeus wasn't merely a figurehead. He governed the skies, yes, but also oaths, hospitality, and justice. If someone broke a sacred promise, it was Zeus they feared. If a stranger arrived at your door, you offered them food and drink in Zeus's name. He was, in many ways, the god of social glue, the one who held things together, even if his own household was often teetering on the brink. Hera, queen of the gods. Now, if you'll forgive a brief aside, no discussion of Zeus is complete without addressing the, shall we say, romantic entanglements. Zeus, it must be admitted, had a wandering eye and foot, and the occasional animal disguise. His liaisons with mortal women and quite a few goddesses form a veritable catalogue of ancient myths. Sometimes he approached them in the form of a handsome man. Other times as a swan, a bull, a shower of golden light. Whatever works, I suppose. These unions produced many of the great heroes of Greek mythology. Heracles, Perseus, Helen of Troy, Minos, and so on, each was born of a different woman, each destined for a different path, and each a small stitch in the grand tapestry of Zeus's legacy, though perhaps not the sort of legacy Hera, his wife, had in mind. Oh yes, Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, and long-suffering spouse of the most prolific philanderer in Olympus. Their marriage, as immortal as it was, would not be described as tranquil. Hera was dignified, intelligent, and ferociously proud. Zeus, for his part, loved her in his own way, but that didn't stop him from repeatedly testing the limits of her patience. If you've ever attended a family dinner where no one mentions the elephant in the room, and then Zeus turns into that elephant, well, you begin to get the idea. Their quarrels were the stuff of legend. Sometimes Hera would attempt to outwit or even overthrow her husband. Once, she orchestrated a rebellion among the Olympians, and Zeus had to be rescued by a 100-armed giant named Briareos. Another time, he suspended her from the sky by golden chains as punishment. Not his finest moment, to be sure. But always they reconciled, or at least reached a détente. Immortality is a long time after all. One does get used to things. Yet Zeus's story is not all mischief and lightning. He was also the arbiter of cosmic balance. When mortals committed crimes or acted with hubris, that dangerous blend of arrogance and defiance, it was Zeus who issued judgment. He sent omens, he dispatched the Furies, he struck down the proud. But he also rewarded virtue, upheld the sacred bonds of guest and host, and listened to prayers. The Greeks saw him as the great anchor of divine authority. His image adorned temples, coins, and statues across the ancient world. In Olympia, a colossal gold and ivory statue of Zeus sat within the grand temple, crafted by the sculptor Phidias, and counted among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. He was not merely a myth, he was a cultural cornerstone. And yet, there's something very human about him, isn't there? For all his thunderbolts and grandeur, Zeus often behaved like an exasperated father, trying to keep a house full of eccentric children from setting the curtains on fire. He meddled in Trojan politics, weighed the fates of heroes in battle, tried often in vain to maintain order on Olympus. It was a divine soap opera, and Zeus was both director and reluctant lead. He could be merciful, forgiving Prometheus, for instance, after centuries of punishment for stealing fire for mankind. And he could be vengeful, as when he flooded the earth to cleanse it of human wickedness. But above all, Zeus was consistent in one regard. He reminded mortals of the limits of their reach. In the myths, those who challenged him, whether giants or kings, almost always fell, not because Zeus hated them necessarily, but because the natural order had to be preserved, and order was what Zeus valued most. In the post-Titan world, the universe was no longer chaos and darkness. It had rhythm, seasons, laws. The stars wheeled in the sky, the rains came and went, cities rose and fell, but the heavens endured, and somewhere high above, Zeus watched it all. It's easy to imagine him as simply a tyrant with a thunderbolt, but I prefer to think of him as something more complex. A divine figure who carried the weight of the world's unpredictability on his shoulders, one who stood between the realm of mortals and the unknown beyond, one who roared and wept and raged not because he was cruel but because the world was full of choices, and none of them ever simple. Even the gods had their burdens. So when we picture him, let it be not only with power in his gaze but with weariness behind it. For though he was the king, his rule was never quiet. There was always a new hero to watch, a new war to judge, a new prophecy to ponder. And all the while the wind shifted, the clouds gathered, and somewhere down below a poet whispered his name. Tonight the thunder is distant, the skies are calm, Zeus reclines in his hall, the firelight glinting off his crown, and the world for the moment is at peace. The stars blink overhead like ancient eyes, and the mountain breathes its slow, eternal rhythm. Sleep now, traveler. You are under the watchful gaze of the king of Olympus, and he is feeling merciful tonight. Poseidon, god of the sea. Now, let's turn our attention to Hera, queen of the gods. You've already met her husband Zeus, in all his thunder-tossing, shape-shifting glory. But Hera is something quite different. Not a ruler of the skies, not a wielder of storms or prophecies, but the quiet and steady heart of Olympus, and on more than one occasion, the source of a sharp look that could turn a lesser deity into stone, or at the very least, send them scuttling off to a minor temple in Thessaly. She was and remains the goddess of marriage, of women, of childbirth, and of regal dignity. But Hera is not merely domestic. She is not gentle in the way springtime is gentle. She is fierce, enduring, intelligent, and more than capable of making her displeasure known, particularly when it concerns the many indiscretions of her husband. But we'll get to that in good time. First, let us begin at the beginning, at her birth. Long before Olympus was even built, Hera was born to the Titans Cronus and Rhea. Yes, that same Cronus who had a rather troubling habit of swallowing his children whole. Hera, like her siblings Hestia, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon, vanished into the belly of her father until Zeus, the youngest and savviest of the lot, rescued them all. One does not typically think of rebirth as an act of digestion, but mythology rarely bothers with subtlety. When Zeus freed his siblings and overthrew the old order, Hera emerged into the world new, though younger than her brother husband. Yes, mythology is like that. She quickly established herself not just as his consort but as his equal in divine authority. She was not merely Zeus's wife. She was the queen of Olympus, crowned in her own right. And how did they meet? Well, Zeus naturally pursued her with all the subtlety of a lightning storm. But Hera, clever and cautious, was not so easily impressed. She resisted his advances, holding him at bay until he employed one of his more peculiar courtship strategies. Disguising himself as a helpless cuckoo bird, he flung himself into her lap, trembling and pitiful. Touched by pity, she cradled the bird, at which point he transformed back into himself and in classic divine fashion took her by surprise. It's not exactly romantic by modern standards, but in the mythological world it was practically a sonnet. Their marriage, however, was far from idyllic. Hera, the goddess of marriage itself, found herself bound to a husband whose fidelity was about as stable as a chariot with one wheel. Zeus's dalliances with mortal women, nymphs, and even other goddesses became the stuff of legend and tragedy. Each time he strayed, Hera's response was not silence or resignation. It was vengeance, measured, precise, and often deeply poetic. But let us be fair. Hera's anger wasn't blind rage. It was rooted in dignity, in a deep sense of what was proper, sacred, and just. She did not lash out without cause. When she punished, she did so with the calm certainty of a queen upholding order in a realm that seemed determined to unravel. Consider, for instance, the tale of Io, a mortal priestess whom Zeus fancied. When Hera came sniffing around, Zeus panicked and turned Io into a white cow. Hera, of course, saw right through this bovine charade. She accepted the cow as a gift ever so graciously, and appointed Argus, a giant with 100 eyes, to guard her. Not the subtlest move, but effective. Zeus, desperate, sent Hermes to lull Argus to sleep with stories and music, and once all 100 eyes had closed, Hermes dispatched him. Hera was furious. She retrieved the cowgirl Io, and placed Argus' many eyes onto the tail of her sacred bird, the peacock, a detail that endures in the bird's plumage to this day. That's the thing about Hera. She didn't forget, she memorialized. She took insults and carved them into the stars, into feathers, into stone. Not out of spite, but out of principle. Her world was order, and when it was disrupted, she responded accordingly. Another tale, this one involving Heracles, one of Zeus's many sons by another woman. Hera hated him from the moment he drew breath. She sent serpents into his cradle. She drove him to madness. She placed obstacles in his path at every turn. And yet, in an irony almost too perfect, it was Heracles, after his death, who was welcomed into Olympus and reconciled with Hera, even marrying her daughter Hebe. One imagines the family dinners were tense, but Hera was not merely an angry wife. That's a simplification, and an unfair one. She was the goddess to whom women prayed for safe childbirth, for a stable home, for the sacred bond of marriage to hold firm. She was protector and patroness of queens. Her temples were among the most splendid in Greece, particularly the great Heraion near Argos, where priestesses performed elaborate rituals and dedicated their lives to her service. She was also the embodiment of regal poise. When Homer describes her in the Iliad, it's with a kind of awed reverence. Tall, proud, golden-eyed, she rides in a chariot pulled by peacocks, wears a crown that gleams with the fire of heaven, and speaks with a voice that can silence a room full of immortals. Even Zeus, for all his bluster, knew when to tread carefully around Hera. Their marriage, for all its strife, was also a political bond, a symbol of cosmic balance. Zeus representing raw power and law, and Hera representing loyalty, structure, and sacred tradition. Together, they ruled not just Olympus but the framework of the Greek cosmos. Their quarrels were myth, yes, but they also reflected the eternal struggle between freedom and fidelity, chaos and order, impulse and restraint. To worship her was not to adore gentleness. It was to honor strength wrapped in dignity. It was to recognize that the world needs not just storms but boundaries, that love is not always sweet. Sometimes it is fierce, wounded, enduring. Sometimes it clenches its jaw and carries on for the sake of something larger than the self. She had her moments of compassion too. She aided Jason and the Argonauts. She watched over women in labor. She lent power to those who upheld justice. In some myths, she is a maternal figure, not soft but solid, the kind of mother who might not kiss your scrapes, but who would stand between you and a charging bull without flinching. In art, she is nearly always majestic, seated on a throne, a scepter in one hand, a lotus-tipped staff or a pomegranate in the other. The pomegranate, as you might recall, being a symbol of fertility and the cycle of life, one that appears frequently in ancient depictions of divine queenship. Her sacred animals beyond the peacock include the cow, not merely for its docility, but for its association with nurturing and steadfastness. There's a reason the Romans called her Juno and made her the chief goddess of their pantheon. Hera's archetype, the divine matron, both feared and revered, echoes across countless cultures. She is not a goddess who fades with time. She is one who endures it. And so we imagine her now, seated in her radiant hall, high above the clouds, the golden light of Olympus falling across her brow. The peacocks shuffle softly at her feet, the fires crackle low, a divine scroll rests beside her, perhaps a new list of grievances, or a wedding invitation, or both. The gods around her quarrel and bicker, laugh and sulk, but Hera remains still, watchful. She does not always speak first, but when she does, Olympus listens. Tonight her gaze is calm, her court is quiet. Somewhere in the mortal world a marriage is made, a child is born. A vow is kept, and the queen of the heavens for once is at peace. Sleep now, traveler. You rest beneath her watchful eyes, and she never forgets. Athena, Goddess of wisdom, beneath the world we know, beneath the mountain roots and the drifting ocean floor, there lies a place older than memory, darker than night and stiller than time. It is not a place of fire, though later ages would say so, nor is it a prison. It is simply what comes next. The Greeks called it the underworld, and at its quiet center sits Hades, god of the dead. Hades, the eldest son of Cronus and Rhea, did not rule Olympus. He did not hurl thunder or stir the seas. His power did not flash, it endured. When the world was divided among the three brothers after the defeat of the Titans, Zeus drew the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades without protest accepted the land beneath the earth. Some say he was unlucky, others say he chose it. In truth, Hades never needed spectacle to be sovereign. He simply was. He is a god of silence, not absence, not cruelty. Silence, in myth. He rarely shouts or boasts. He acts with measure, with weight. Mortals feared him, yes, but they also respected him. Not because he brought death, he did not, but because he received it, because all roads in time lead to him. His realm is vast, layered like the roots of a great tree. The dead come by way of Hermes, who guides them gently down. At the threshold waits Charon, the ferryman, demanding his coin. It was for this reason that Greeks placed obols in the mouths of their dead. To be caught without payment meant wandering the shores of the Styx forever, unheard and unmourned, and the Styx is only one of many rivers. There is the Acheron, river of pain, the Cocytus, river of lamentation, the Phlegethon, which burns without consuming, and Lethe, river of forgetfulness, whose waters wash the mind to sleep. Each river marks a passage not just in distance, but in meaning. They do not flow through geography, they flow through memory, through fear, through hope. The dead are judged by three ancient kings, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. Most souls go to the Asphodel meadows, where they drift in a dreamless peace, unremarkable, undisturbed. A few, the wicked, descend to Tartarus, the deepest pit, where punishment suits the crime, and a rare few, the most noble, ascend to the Elysian fields, a place of music, sunlight, and soft breezes, where even in death the good may breathe freely. This realm is Hades' charge. He governs it not with fire, but with order. He is not cruel, he is not kind. He simply ensures that what must be is, that every soul is received, remembered, and placed. There is dignity in that, and yet, despite this, he is often misunderstood. In art and story he is sometimes mistaken for the villain, perhaps because death itself is feared, and he is its face. But Hades is no more evil than gravity. He does not hunt souls. He does not tempt or torment. He rules patiently and perpetually over the inevitable. His most famous myth, of course, is that of Persephone. The tale begins in sunlight, with flowers. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, was picking blooms in a field when the earth opened. Hades rose in his chariot of obsidian and took her down beneath the roots of the world. Demeter, searching the earth, refusing to let crops grow until her daughter was returned. And so, at last, a compromise was made. Persephone would spend part of the year above with her mother and part below with her husband. Thus came the seasons. Spring and summer for joy, autumn and winter for mourning. Was it love? Was it power? The myths differ. But in the underworld, Persephone became queen, not a captive, not merely a consort, but a ruler in her own right. She sat beside Hades, not behind him. She guided the dead past judgment, tended the pale gardens of the shades. And Hades he did not rage, he did not betray. In all the stories he is perhaps the only god who does not cheat, who does not stray. His realm was enough. His crown was enough. His queen was enough. He is often called Pluton, the rich one, for all things beneath the earth belong to him. Gold, silver, precious stones, seeds in the soil. From him come not only endings but beginnings. Seeds must lie in darkness before they sprout, and Hades rules that darkness. He rarely appeared among the other gods. When he did, it was always for great cause. He aided in the war against the giants. He lent his helm of invisibility to Perseus, who used it to escape after slaying Medusa. But mostly he remained apart, watching, waiting, attending to his domain. His presence was felt in rituals of mourning, in the rustle of grave goods, in the hush after a final breath. Sacrifices to Hades were done at night with black animals, the smoke sent downward. His name was spoken in whispers or not at all. To call him drew his gaze, and that was a heavy thing, yet not all feared him. In the Orphic traditions his name was part of the mystery rites that promised rebirth. In the Orphic traditions he was not an ending but a gatekeeper to the next beginning. Some even believed in cycles of life and death, of reincarnation, and Hades stood not as a wall but as a door. Imagine him now, if you will, seated on a throne of volcanic stone, surrounded by shadow. his robe falling in quiet folds around him. Flicker the shades of those long gone, speaking in murmurs only the dead understand. Beside him, Persephone tends a garden of pale flowers that bloom without sun. The air smells faintly of myrrh and memory. He holds a scepter, not to strike, but to signal order. The dead do not rise in rebellion. They do not need chains. The weight of time itself holds them in place. Unlike his brothers, Hades does not crave glory. He is not jealous of Olympus. He does not interfere with mortals unless they enter his domain without permission. And even then, he is more judge than executioner. He sets terms, he upholds them. Consider Orpheus, who came to plead for Eurydice. Hades listened. He agreed. He gave the poet a chance to lead her out, on one condition: do not look back. And when Orpheus did, Hades took nothing more than what was owed. There was no trickery, only the rules. In a world where even gods could be petty, Hades was consistent. Perhaps that is why, for all his distance, he was trusted, feared, yes, but also trusted. And so the Greeks lived with him, always in mind, not in terror, but in acknowledgement. They built tombs with care. They left offerings. They remembered names. Because to be remembered was to remain just a little longer in the world above. Tonight, as you lay your head down, you need not fear the God below. He is not waiting in your shadow. He is keeping watch over those already gone. He tends a realm not of fire, but of memory. He sits in silence because there is nothing more to prove. Sleep now, let the earth hold you gently. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on the Acheron. Let the hush of that quiet kingdom lull you into rest. Hades waits, but not for you, not yet. He only waits as the world turns, and he always will. Artemis and Apollo, twin gods they say, she was born not in the ordinary way but from a headache, a rather severe one. Zeus, as the story goes, had swallowed her mother, Métis, the goddess of wisdom, because it had been foretold that she would bear a child mightier than he. Problem solved, he thought. But divine digestion is rarely the end of a tale in Greek myth. One day, Zeus began to suffer an unbearable pain in his skull. Gods gathered. Suggestions were made. Eventually, Hephaestus, ever practical, struck Zeus's head with an axe. Out sprang Athena, fully grown and fully armed, a spear in one hand and a shield in the other, shouting a battle cry that echoed across Olympus, a dramatic entrance even by divine standards. Athena, goddess of wisdom, war strategy, crafts, and reason, arrived not as a child but as an idea made flesh, poised calm and already thinking 3 moves ahead. She wore a helm, bore the aegis of Zeus, and from her first breath demanded the respect of gods and mortals alike. Her presence on Olympus was distinct. Unlike many of her peers, Athena was not known for tempestuous love affairs or dramatic feuds over vanity. Though she wasn't entirely above such things, she was measured, exacting, and rather fond of logic. In a realm of passion and power, she was principle personified. That said, she was not cold. She simply saw the long game. Cities and civilizations adored her. Most famously, of course, Athens itself took her name. The contest between Athena and Poseidon for the patronage of the city is one of those tales that reveals as much about Greek values as it does about the gods themselves. Poseidon, being who he was, offered a gift of grandeur. He struck the earth and produced a saltwater spring, or in some versions a warhorse. Either way, impressive, but not terribly useful to the residents of a rocky inland city. Athena, ever pragmatic, planted the olive tree. Shade, food, oil, and wood, all from one gift. The Athenians chose her, and frankly, who wouldn't? From then on, Athena became more than a goddess to them. She was the guardian of their identity, their sense of civic pride, their pursuit of reason, art, and just war. Her temple, the Parthenon, still crowns the Acropolis today, its columns watching the Aegean like sentinels of marble. It remains not just a relic of ancient architecture but a testament to her enduring spirit. Athena's approach to war was nothing like Ares' bloodlust. She preferred tactics, planning, the application of intelligence to conflict. She represented the mind in battle, not the frenzy. She advised heroes rather than charging in herself. Odysseus, in particular, earned her favor. His cunning, his guile, his talent for words over weapons, all were qualities she prized. She guided him home through storm and strife, always the voice of reason whispering beneath the chaos. But wisdom is not always gentle. Athena could be uncompromising, and when insulted, her wrath was cold and enduring. Take the tale of Arachne, a mortal weaver whose skill was so great she dared claim superiority to the goddess herself. Athena, not known for indulging arrogance, challenged her to a contest. Arachne's tapestry was flawless. even daring to depict the gods in their less flattering moments. Athena, though impressed, tore it to shreds. She struck Arachne down, but, in a rare moment of mercy or poetic justice, transformed her into the first spider, to weave forever. This balance of pride and precision defined Athena. She upheld honor but never shied from asserting her place. She did not scream, she did not scheme. She simply stood her ground, and others yielded. She was also a patroness of crafts and invention. Pottery, weaving, architecture, all fell under her guidance. She inspired not just warriors, but artisans, philosophers, and lawmakers. Her symbol, the owl, denoted clear-sightedness, and was stamped on the coins of Athens. Wherever thoughtful hands shaped the world, Athena was there. Artists spoke her name before chiseling marble. Statesmen offered silent prayers before debating law. Curiously, she remained a virgin goddess, not in prudishness but in independence. She did not marry. She did not pursue or yield to pursuit. Her loyalty lay with principle, not passion. This lent a certain clarity, a steadiness untouched by the usual romantic entanglements that entangled her peers. She stood alone, and from that solitude came strength. Even her friends knew to tread carefully. When Tiresias, the blind prophet, accidentally witnessed her bathing, Athena struck him blind, but in fairness she also gave him the gift of prophecy to balance the scales. Firm but fair, that was her way. In art, Athena is almost always armed but never aggressive. Her shield often bore the head of Medusa, a grim gift from Perseus after his fateful quest. According to some tales, she aided him by guiding his hand, lending him tools, whispering courage. But her choice to place Medusa's face on her shield, that was something more. A warning, perhaps, or a reminder that wisdom does not flinch from horror. It absorbs it, reflects it, uses it. Athena had no shortage of temples across the Greek world. In addition to the Parthenon, sanctuaries in places like Delphi and Sparta honored her many aspects: warrior, lawgiver, protector. Festivals such as the Panathenaea celebrated her birth and her role in civic life, combining athletic contests, sacrifices, and parades of woven robes made in her honor. In one such rite, young women would carry offerings in silence, their steps measured, their robes flowing like water under olive trees. Her epithets tell the story of her scope: Athena Parthenos, the maiden; Athena Polias, of the city; Athena Promachos, she who fights in front; Athena Ergain, the industrious; Athena Nike, bearer of victory. She was many things but never distant. Even in myth, she is the goddess most likely to walk beside mortals, to speak plainly, to guide without condescension. She saw potential where others saw fault. She offered guidance, not flattery, expectation, not indulgence. There were contradictions, of course. She upheld justice but stood silent when her fellow gods acted with less than noble intent. She punished women who crossed lines, yet empowered heroes to defy the odds. But perhaps that was her wisdom, knowing when to act and when to wait. Not every wrong needed to be shouted down. Some could be corrected with time, with silence, with the long view. Athena always had the long view. She rarely raised her voice, but when she did, it was the sound of clear judgment, like bronze striking bronze in the still air before battle, a single note impossible to ignore. Her advice was often laced with calm warnings, softly spoken truths. In council, the gods might argue for hours, but when Athena spoke, the room fell still. Her logic was not easily refuted. Her presence was not easily dismissed. Imagine her now, seated on her marble throne high in the halls of Olympus. Her eyes are cool and calm, scanning scrolls of mortal deeds. She does not smile often, but when she does, it is the smile of one who sees potential, not perfection. Her owl perches silently nearby, and outside, the stars wheel in precise procession. Every movement above reflects her mind below, quiet, deliberate, constant. Somewhere below, a child learns to write, a potter turns a wheel, a general marks a map, a philosopher pauses mid-thought, wondering from where the insight came. And in all these things Athena stirs. She is not the flashiest of gods, not the loudest, but she is the one whose name is whispered in libraries and courtrooms, in war rooms and workshops. She is wisdom in bronze. And tonight, as you close your eyes and drift toward dreams, know that she keeps watch, not in thunder or fire, but in thought, in structure, in the still strength of what is rightly built. Sleep now, and if you dream, let it be of olive groves and marble halls, of clear skies and steady hands. Athena is near. Ares and Hephaestus, gods of war and forge, in the soft glow before dawn, when the world holds its breath and the sky hesitates between silver and gold. Two figures move through myth, twins born of the same mother, destined to walk very different paths beneath the same ancient heavens. Apollo and Artemis, sunlight and moonlight, brother and sister, opposites and echoes. They were born on the island of Delos, a place said to have once drifted free in the sea until it anchored itself, just in time to shelter their mother Leto. Hera, ever so fond of revenge and not at all fond of Zeus's many liaisons, had forbidden any land to receive Leto while she was pregnant. Delos, unrooted and wild, was not bound by such rules. And so, on that shifting soil beneath a curious sky, Leto gave birth to Artemis first and then Apollo. From the beginning they were not ordinary children. Artemis, it is said, helped deliver her brother, and thus became the goddess of childbirth and protector of the young. Apollo, radiant and golden, emerged second but would come to embody light, music, poetry, prophecy, and healing. A resume so robust it might make even Hermes blink. The two were close but distinct. Artemis claimed the wild forests, mountains, creatures of the night. She roamed with her bow and hounds, untouched by civilization, untouched by men. A virgin goddess, her strength lay in independence, her power in her distance. She guarded the liminal spaces, dusk, wilderness, the edge of becoming. Apollo, by contrast, loved the center, the sunlight, the lyre. The temple steps warm with afternoon heat. He ruled order and clarity, truth spoken through the lips of oracles, the measured beat of poetry, the clean line of sculpture. Where Artemis prowled under trees, Apollo strode into plazas, head lifted, every step in rhythm. And yet they remained mirrors of each other. Where he brought the day, she drew the night. Where he offered reason, she guarded mystery. They did not oppose one another. They completed a circle. Apollo's most famous shrine was at Delphi, where the oracle of the Pythia would sit upon a tripod and speak his prophecies, often in riddles that twisted fate and free will into a single thread. Pilgrims came from across the Greek world to ask their questions and receive their cryptic answers. And though the responses were maddeningly vague at times, Apollo's gift was not in simplicity, it was in insight. He was also a musician beyond compare. His lyre, given to him by Hermes in apology for a rather cheeky cattle theft, became a symbol of celestial harmony. With it, he could soothe storms, calm minds, and sway hearts. His songs were not merely entertainment. They were structure, soul, cosmos turned into melody. But Apollo was not all light. His stories, like those of all the Olympians, carry shadows. He loved often and disastrously. Daphne, a nymph who fled him, was turned into a laurel tree to escape his pursuit. Coronis, whom he loved, betrayed him, and he struck her down, only to save their unborn child Asclepius, god of medicine. His wrath was precise, his grief enduring. Artemis, too, had her shadows. She punished those who saw her without consent. Actaeon, a hunter who stumbled upon her bathing, was transformed into a stag torn apart by his own hounds. She was protective to the point of fury, unyielding in her expectations. But she was also kind to those who honored her solitude. She guarded the vulnerable, walked beside maidens, lent her strength to women in labor, and was invoked in the hush of moonlit prayers. Unlike her brother, Artemis built no cities. Her temples were often deep in forests or perched on cliffside paths. She preferred the company of nymphs, wild animals, and stars. And yet her worship was widespread. From Ephesus to Brauron, from Arcadia to Sicily, girls danced in her honor, shedding their childhood names in rites of passage that whispered of transformation. Together, Apollo and Artemis represented more than light and dark. They were a pair of divine principles, reason and intuition, civilization and wilderness, speech and silence, the bow that hunted, and the lyre that healed. And always, always they remained siblings, never rivals, never strangers. One tale tells of the Gigantomachy, the battle between the gods and the giants. In it, Apollo and Artemis fought side by side. He struck with arrows of burning gold, she with arrows silver cold. Together they felled foes far larger than themselves. Their aim was unwavering, their cause righteous. The sun and moon fought as one. Another myth speaks of the death of Niobe's children. Niobe, a queen, mocked Leto for having only 2 offspring while she herself had many. Enraged by the insult, Artemis and Apollo took up their bows. One by one they struck down Niobe's children, he the sons, she the daughters. Only one child in some versions was spared. Niobe fled, weeping, and was turned to stone. The waterfall of endless mourning. The lesson, while grim, was clear. Do not mock the mother of light and shadow. And yet these myths were not simply warnings. They were mirrors held to the human heart, showing how passion, loyalty, and power play out in forms larger than life. Through these stories, the Greeks explored the very structure of feeling. Apollo and Artemis did not merely punish or protect, they expressed divine aspects of our own inner worlds. Apollo, the god of healing, was also the god of plague. A single note from his bow could bring sickness, another restoration. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, was both life-giver and death-dealer to animals. They held paradox in their palms, like a bowstring stretched between extremes. Historically, their worship shaped much of Greek religious life. At Delphi, Apollo's oracle defined political decisions, voyages, and even wars. The Delian League took its name from his birthplace. Athletes swore oaths in his name before the Pythian Games, held every 4 years in his honor. Artemis, meanwhile, was central to rites of maturity at Brauron. Girls approaching womanhood took part in rituals where they dressed as bears, an echo of Artemis' role as guardian of transitions. Her sanctuary at Ephesus, with its massive temple and statues adorned with symbols of fertility and wildlife, was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Romans, too, honored them. Apollo remained Apollo, a rare instance of continuity. Artemis became Diana, and her image continued to stalk moonlit groves, untamed and untouched. In art, Apollo is shown as youthful, beardless, often holding his lyre or bow. His face is serene, his posture poised. He represents the ideal balance, grace, harmony. Artemis, in contrast, is swift and sure. Her robes swirl as she moves. Her gaze is sharp as the silver tip of her arrow. She is both the stillness of the forest and the sudden snap of a branch. Imagine them now, side by side at the edge of the world. Apollo lifts the sun once more. The sky is flushed with gold. Birds begin to stir. Songs gently warm the air. Behind him, Artemis draws the moon down, folding it in shadow. The stars sigh. A deer steps softly through mist, and between them the world wakes. They do not speak, but they do not need to. They have walked this dance since time began. Apollo glances east, where day waits with open arms. Artemis turns west into the deep hush of the woods, and for a moment their paths cross. Light and dark, brother and sister. Sleep now, let moonlight guide you toward dreams. Let the last golden chords of Apollo's lyre fade into stillness. The twins keep their watch and the world for now is balanced. Settle in now, let the sounds of battle fade and the clang of hammers grow gentle. Tonight we visit 2 gods so different in nature they rarely share a page. Yet here they are, side by side in our dreams. One is fury with a sword, the other fire with a purpose. Ares and Hephaestus, the god of war and the god of the forge. Together they paint a curious picture of masculinity in ancient Greece. One all brawn and blood, the other limping but brilliant. And if the myths are to be believed, which at bedtime we rather hope they are, the Olympian family didn't quite know what to do with either of them. Ares, son of Zeus and Hera, was the personification of raw, untamed violence. Not the tactical war of generals, not the careful strategy of Athena. No, Ares was the thundering heart, the rising scream, the blind charge into chaos. The Greeks called him Ares, and while they respected what he represented, they didn't exactly invite him to dinner. Even Zeus, his own father, mind you, was famously unimpressed. In Homer's Iliad, Zeus calls Ares the most hateful of all the gods, and not in the sort of way that implies playful teasing over wine. Ares embodied the kind of war that scorched fields and toppled cities for no reason at all. He delighted in the clash of bronze on bronze, the whinny of panicked horses, the cries of dying men. His companions were equally charming. Phobos, fear; Deimos, terror; and Eris, strife. They followed him into battle like an entourage no mortal would dare invite to a feast. And yet, despite his ferocity, Ares wasn't particularly successful. He lost duels. He was once trapped in a jar for months by 2 mortal sons of Poseidon. Yes, a god of war corked like pickled olives. It's enough to make one wonder if the Greeks were having a quiet laugh at his expense. But contrast Ares with how the Romans saw him. Mars, as they called him, was revered, honored, worshipped with parades. While the Greeks regarded Ares with caution, the Romans embraced him as a symbol of disciplined might and empire. A curious shift, perhaps reflecting the values of a rising military power versus a culture that preferred wit, reason, and an afternoon of philosophy in the shade. Still, there's something almost endearing about Ares. He wears his passion plainly. He falls. And oh how he falls, madly for Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. And what a pair they made. She, radiant and sly, he, straightforward and smitten. Their affair, though no secret, was not subtle. They were caught in the act by Hephaestus, her husband, who ensnared them in a net of his own making. Now that brings us to our second god tonight. The quiet, smoldering power of the forge. Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith. son of Hera and, depending on which version you prefer, perhaps without a father at all. Some say Hera bore him alone in revenge for Zeus birthing Athena from his head. That's Olympian parenting for you. Equal parts miracle and pettiness. But Hephaestus was born lame, and in the glistening society of gods, where beauty and power were expected, he stood apart. Myths differ. In one, Hera throws him from Olympus in disgust. In another, it's Zeus who does so after a disagreement. Either way, the poor lad gets launched off a cloud and crashes into the sea, where kindly sea nymphs raise him. Now that would make for an awkward family reunion, wouldn't it? But Hephaestus doesn't brood forever. He learns, he builds. In time he returns to Olympus not with wrath but with skill. And what skill it is! He creates thrones, automatons, palaces of bronze. He crafts Achilles' shield, so intricate that poets had to stop and describe it for hundreds of lines. He builds Pandora, the first woman, fashioned so finely she was irresistible. Hephaestus is quite simply the patron of invention. And not just of swords and armor but of every tool, every spark of progress shaped by hand. Where Ares is destruction, Hephaestus is creation. Through flame the hammer and the anvil become his altar. The ancients recognized this. He had cults across Greece, especially in Athens, and on Lemnos, the volcanic island that claimed to be his earthly home. There fires were sacred, and every blacksmith was a kind of priest, echoing their divine patron in sweat and soot. In Athens, Hephaestus shared a temple with Athena. A pairing not romantic but symbolic. She brought wisdom. He brought the means to build it, craftsmanship and cleverness, side by side. And yet, for all his brilliance, Hephaestus rarely wins in myth. His marriage to Aphrodite is unfaithful. His traps are ingenious, but they rarely solve his loneliness. He is powerful but not worshipped for his appearance or charm. In this way, he is one of the more relatable gods, not draped in glory but laboring in the shadows, forging the world while others fight over it. And maybe that's the secret, because the Greeks, for all their love of myth, were practical. They built, they reasoned, they argued in the agora and laid stones in perfect lines. While Ares might shout and wave his sword, Hephaestus quietly forged the hinge it swung on. Still, they're both part of the same divine family, and one imagines the dinners on Olympus were, well, complicated. Imagine it. Ares boasting of a battlefield drenched in glory while Hephaestus scowls over a scorch mark on his latest sculpture. Hera sighs. Apollo plucks a judgmental chord. Dionysus refills everyone's cup. Aphrodite checks her reflection in a polished shield. And somewhere in the back Hermes snickers. But beneath the myth there's something ancient and telling here. These two gods represent a duality that every civilization wrestles with. Force and function, chaos and craft. Fire that burns and fire that builds. We must remember that war, though often glorified in poetry, was a terrifying reality. The Greeks were no strangers to conflict. Hoplite battles, city-state skirmishes, Persian invasions. They had seen what war could do, and perhaps that's why Ares was kept at arm's length, a necessary force, but not an honored guest. In contrast, the tools of Hephaestus were present in every life. The plow, the spear, the loom's axle, the temple's columns, all bore the echo of his forge. To praise him was to praise civilization itself. In vase paintings and statuary, he is often depicted with muscular arms, soot-blackened face, and a short workman's tunic. He doesn't glow with ethereal light. He sweats. He bends metal. He limps with purpose. Ares, on the other hand, is all sharp lines and bronze gleam. Plumed helmet, shield at the ready, chin held just so. His beauty is as carefully wrought as his sword, but somehow always less trustworthy. And so the Greeks taught their children, strength alone is not enough. Build, create, work with your hands. Let the fire warm, not consume. Still, perhaps Ares needed to exist, if only to remind us how precious peace is. And Hephaestus, for all his trials, remained indispensable. Even the gods needed a smith. As we drift further into stillness, think of the forge glowing softly in the night, surrounded by tools, half-finished wonders, and the scent of warm metal. No shouting, no clashing spears, only quiet firelight and the slow rhythm of the hammer. Perhaps the heart of Olympus wasn't in the throne room but in the forge below. And somewhere deep in the mountain halls, a god with a limp and a mind of steel continues to shape the world, while far above, a war god sharpens his blade, just in case. Let the sparks fade now, one by one. The fire dims, the clang of iron grows faint, and the gods, ever flawed, fall silent. Conclusion. And so, here in this final chapter, we find something curious. The Olympian family is filled with movement, war, lust, laughter, rage. But at either end, bookending the myths like candles on a shrine, are two figures who do not chase, who do not flee, who simply hold. Hestia at the center of the home, Hades at the center of the earth. One keeps the fire burning, the other welcomes the flame when it fades, and neither boasts, though they touch every moment of life from the first breath by the cradle to the last sigh at the tombstone. In art they are quiet. Hestia appears veiled, seated, serene, a modest woman holding a flame. Hades, often bearded and reserved, sits beside Persephone, sometimes with a cornucopia, a reminder that what lies beneath nourishes what grows above. And perhaps that's the lesson the Greeks left us, that glory isn't always loud, that power doesn't always parade, that the greatest forces in life are those that simply endure. So now, let the fire burn low, let the earth cradle your thoughts. In one corner of the hearth a flame flickers constant, unbothered by wind or time. Far below, in quiet halls of stone, a king walks the corridors of memory, steady and patient. And in between, everything we are. Let Hestia hold your dreams, let Hades guard your rest, and let sleep take you gently, where the gods who stayed home still keep their watch.